clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues heading west of Glasgow on the M8 at junction 23, the Dumbreck Road exit. A lorry's broken down, causing queues the start before the M74, looking at the cameras. On the Surrey stretch of the M25, the outside lane of Free is blocked anti-clockwise just after junction 6 at Goldstone. There's been a collision in the roadworks, causing queues back to the M23 interchange. In Essex, the A127 at East Horndon is blocked south-end bound at the Halfway House roundabout following an accident, causing queues back to the M25. In East Sussex, south of Halland, the A22 closed on the East Hoveley bypass for emergency repairs off the Shaw roundabout. In Devon, Union Street, the A374 at Plymouth City Centre blocked by an accident. And in Swansea, the A483, the New Cut Road, is closed due to a fire incident just by the railway bridge. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, Keir Starmer has become the first UK Prime Minister in 6 years to meet with the President of China to develop relations. Is this the right move or not? And it's all about the upstream, says our government, as they explore giving millions of pounds to other countries to try and stop migration. I thought we were skinned. Where do we find all this money? And speaking of migration, by the way, do you remember the Rwanda plan booted out by this government? Well, that is now apparently being explored by Donald Trump. You literally couldn't make this up. And speaking of making stuff up, Rachel Reeves is coming under increased pressure. Her online CV on LinkedIn. Just what is the truth of her career, and what, if any, should be a consequence if indeed she has perhaps not told the truth? And keeping me company till 7 o'clock, Benedict Spence, political commentator, and Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live to tonight's 6 o'clock news.
Thank you, Michelle. The time is just after 6 o'clock, and these are your latest headlines. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM has also said Ukraine is top of his agenda. This comes after President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied missiles at Russia. This decision from Mr Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Earlier, Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge said the move from the US president is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand the US State Department, they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances, this decision is justified.
Meanwhile, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News earlier that the government are also committed to helping the Ukrainian people.
We stand steadfast behind the Ukrainian people, behind the Ukrainian government. That was the case under the last Conservative government, and there was cross-party support in the face of Russian aggression for the Ukrainian people. We continue to maintain that position, and as we enter almost the 1,000th day of the conflict, I think it really brings into sharp focus the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people. And the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary, from our point of view, will always continue to keep under review what is necessary by way of military aid for the Ukrainian people.
And the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow, ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in what's being described by the Met Office as the country's first taste of winter. Today, snow and frost have been recorded across parts of the Yorkshire Dales, as well as in certain areas of Scotland, including at the Corgarth viewpoint in Aberdeenshire. That's as an amber warning comes into force at 7 p.m. this evening, covering the east and north of England, the Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber, with yellow alerts coming into place for the southeast, southwest and London at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. I hope you are very well. What do you think when you hear about those potential snow warnings? Do you sit there and think, yes, you'll have a little bit of snow? Are you perhaps someone that thinks, oh gosh, this is my worst nightmare because it's all going to be slippy and dangerous? Or couldn't you care less? Tell me. Look, keeping me company tonight, my panel, I've got Benedict Spence, a political commentator. Alongside him, I've got Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. Welcome, gents, to both of you.
Good evening.
So you can get in touch with me at home all the usual ways. You're very welcome this evening. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, which is gbnews.com/yoursay. Or, of course, you can tweet or X me. And if you're on your way out, don't worry, you can take me with you. Put me on your radio, DAB+. What a treat for your earlobes. But look, speaking of treats for your earlobes, let's listen to Keir Starmer speaking out today.
I've been clear that I want a serious and pragmatic relationship with China. It's the second biggest economy in the world. It's one of our biggest trading partners, and therefore we have issues that we clearly need to discuss, whilst of course being clear about the issues that we do not agree on. But I will always act in the national interest, and that was the basis upon which we had our discussions this morning.
I mean, for someone that's apparently worried about climate emissions, they don't have to get about a bit, doesn't he, our Keir Starmer? But on this issue about closer relations with China, he's the first PM in, I think, 6 years to be meeting President Xi Jinping there. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's pragmatic, and The reality is it has to be. I know that a lot of people would like to be a lot more hawkish on China, but the reality is it's too deeply embedded into all sorts of Western supply chains for Western countries to just tear up its agreements and ignore it and go, no, we're not going to deal with you because we don't like what it is that you're selling, we don't like your ideology, X, Y, Z. It's, you know, the Chinese are actually very effective. They know what they're doing. They've, you know, strategized very well at sort of embedding themselves into various regions of the world. And that's not because it's like the Soviet Union or anything like that. There's some sort of nefarious attempt to spread a version of communism around the world. It's simply about self-preservation and its own internal domestic political interests. We have been, I think, a lot more hawkish in our language in recent years about China, and I understand why that is. Some of it is very justified. But I think that there is a realization now, certainly amongst a lot of European countries, in the aftermath of the economic fragility that we've gone through recently, that actually we are not in a position to be getting on without China or to be alienating China. As much as we might like to decouple from them, and we should aim to try to diversify and decouple from them, you can't simply do that overnight. And also, you can't just sort of shout a hue and cry about human rights. China is going to continue to behave in the manner that it is. At a meeting in Lima with Joe Biden 2 days ago, Xi Jinping said, actually, we're not interested in the United States lecturing us on things like human rights or Taiwan. These are red lines for us. We're just not going to deal with you if this is what you want to do. And I think that it's sort of not putting the West on notice so much, but it's a sort of a, look, if you want to deal with us, fine. There's a lot of benefits to be had. But if you don't, that's fine as well. We've insulated ourselves against a world in which the West turns against us.
Aaron?
Yeah, there's a lot to lose if we alienate China. First and foremost, well, maybe not first and foremost, but certainly pretty high up the list is the collapse of our universities and higher education system if there was ever a major falling out with Beijing. Secondly, we basically outsourced our energy needs in Europe to Russia. To a significant extent, obviously, we get some liquid natural gas from places like Qatar and Norway and so on, but a lot of it came from Russia, particularly for the Germans, Central and parts of Eastern Europe. And we've outsourced a lot of our consumer durables, the stuff that you manufacture, that you make, to China. Now, if you thought inflation was bad during the energy crisis of 2020, 2021, bit of 2022, particularly those last 2 years, you ain't seen nothing yet, because obviously, as I'm sure pretty much all of your listeners and viewers are aware, the vast majority of the consumer goods, from your kettle to the latest gizmo you're probably holding in your hand, was made in China. If it wasn't made in China, it was possibly made in Taiwan. Another reason that we want to keep things calm, because the overwhelming majority of the most powerful microprocessors in the world are made by the Taiwanese. We do not want a war in that part of the world, because good luck getting an affordable phone or computer for several years after that.
Well, Donald Trump's not bothered, though, is he? Because he's going to slap tariffs with, I think, 40%.
Well, he hasn't done it yet.
Are you saying you don't think he will?
I think he will on some things, but I think it would be very unwise for the US to slap tariffs on microprocessors now. They've got a strategy, which is a very clever strategy. It's basically bipartisan, although, of course, Trump was bashing Biden for it, which was IRA and CHIPS, but particularly the CHIPS Act, which was to effectively reshore lots of microprocessor manufacture back to the United States or to other favourable countries which aren't Taiwan, safer countries. That is a sensible strategy. They'll put tariffs on other things, cars, because they can make cars in the US. Microprocessors, they're not quite up to the level of the Taiwanese.
I know I'm living in dream world with my next suggestion, because I guess it's never going to happen. But many people will be shouting at their screens, what about reparations for COVID? They absolutely brought this work. I did caveat that. With I recognise that I'm in dream world.
Yeah, what about
but notwithstanding that, they literally brought the world's economy to its knees.
I think even if the Chinese were prepared to engage with that argument for a second, they'd say that the reparations is the economic bounty that they bring the rest of the world by selling them goods and technology at affordable rates. I think that that's not something that they're ever going to, honestly engage with.
I tried, ladies and gents, because you email this suggestion to me all the time. I'm trying to be a voice.
You might see the Trump administration talk a lot about this. I know that it's a particular bugbear of certain features within it. I'm sure that they will be calling for Anthony Fauci to be put in front of Congress and all that sort of thing. But as far as China is concerned, I don't think that they even expect to have to answer that question with a straight face.
Well, let's talk about Ukraine then, shall we? Keir Starmer again speaking out about this country. Take a listen.
I'm at the G20 with one message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details because the only winner, if we were to do that, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Double down on our support. I don't know where all this money comes from, everyone. I honestly did think that we were skint, but we do seem to have this never-ending magic money tree, don't we, for every single foreign issue in the land when it comes to conflicts and so on. Look, Joe Biden, many people would have assumed that he was just going to have a nice little extended nap until January, but oh no, he's sprung into action, Benedict. Yeah. He's now approved the use of these long-range missiles into Russia. An escalation, many would say. What should we do? How should we respond?
I mean, I think that this isn't going to have much of an impact in terms of helping Ukraine to actually win back the territory that it's lost. I think that they'd wanted that. They should have done it 2 years ago. I think it's very late in the day, and I think that Ukraine, through massive attrition and failed operations of its own, has lost too much in the way of manpower to actually win back a lot of this. What it might do is throw a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of what Donald Trump wants to do, which is bring the war to a close, because Donald Trump does want to get it done quickly. It's, again, the very unpopular topic amongst many Republicans. But I think that the Russians will see this justifiably as an escalation. They will be able to turn around and say, well, look, now that the Ukrainians have got these missiles, we can justify more military operations in order to neutralise this, because they could use that to target our oil infrastructure all the way across the country. At which point the United States turns around to the Ukrainians and goes, well, please don't use that. And they'll go, well, no, we already have this stuff. This is absolutely what we're going to do, and we don't trust you because we think that you're going to sell us down the river. So it is an effort, I think, to, if you like, buy Ukraine a little bit more time so that Donald Trump can't strong-arm them quite as quickly into ceding territory, which is ultimately probably what's going to happen. And it gives European countries the opportunity to save face, maybe have a bit more of a whip round, find a little bit more money, send a few more weapons here or there. But ultimately, I think it's just delaying the inevitable. There was an opportunity to win back this territory. I think that's long gone now.
Aaron?
Well, when Keir Starmer says double down, it reminds me of all those press conferences from 2005 to 2010 about Iraq and Afghanistan. There was the surge. We're going to have loads of troops go in. This is it. One more push. We're almost there. It's almost over. And I feel it's a very similar story that Western publics are being told about Ukraine. Frankly, the Ukrainians have zero chance of defeating Russia right now. That wasn't necessarily the case 2 years ago. And the Russian economy is simply too big. Its industrial capacity with regards to armaments production is too big. It is a massive energy superpower. It has the support of many countries around the world, albeit not countries in Europe and the United States. And it's winning. So the question is, how do you negotiate a peace? How much would Ukraine have to give up? I mean, if it just has to surrender Crimea, as Donald Trump hints, I think that would be an accomplishment at this point. Now, I know that's not a particularly popular thing to say, but there's no point digging a hole if it's in the wrong place. There's no point in doubling down on something if it's not working. So I hope that there is progress on a negotiated peace as quickly as the presidency changes. And I find Starmer's positioning on this very, very weird.
What do you think, do you find it all very, very weird? How do you think this whole mess will come to an end? Do you reckon Donald Trump is indeed the man to fix it? And what about this whole endless resource that we seem to have financially when it comes to getting ourselves involved in these things? Where does this money come from when we seem to have so many domestic issues that we cannot, or should I say refuse, to spend money on? But look, let's talk about young people. You're not getting off scot-free on this programme, no, because now we've talked tough, haven't we, about whether or not you should be allowed benefits and what you should have to do to receive them. But what about when you're young then? Should you have to be in either employment or training? And if you choose not to be, should you essentially have your benefits removed? See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have, security, you know. Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that, you know, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting. And worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons. Obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry. Till 7, Aaron Bastani and Benedict Spence remain alongside me. Ron in Surrey, he's got in touch and said, Michelle, how come you're not referencing Reform UK bringing a private prosecution in that Manchester airport situation? Believe you me, Ron in Surrey, I would love to be able to comment on that, but because it's a live legal investigation, I cannot at this moment in time. But yes, I've seen it and I find it very interesting indeed. Look, let's talk about the youth then, shall we? Because we often talk about the qualifications for benefits, who should get them, how deep the support system should be. So when it comes to being a young person, I've just left this age because it's 16 to 21. I'm just about on the edge of that, everybody. The government are toying with this new idea of a youth guarantee scheme, long story short. What it would mean, basically, 18 to 21, sorry, it means that you would have to essentially be in training or employment if you want to continue receiving benefits. Surely, though, this is just a basic, simple, good idea, isn't it?
It sort of is, but it depends what the training is,
Right.
is ultimately what I'd say. I think it's all very well just saying, well, you need to be doing something. And yes, I think that there's a lot of good to be found in being active and, improving yourself. Nobody's going to disparage that. But if it's not something, I think, that speaks to the young person in question, and, this isn't saying that we should offer all and sundry, but if it's something that they don't potentially see as being useful to a path to prosperity long term, I don't think they're going to be particularly enthusiastic by that, at which point
So
it's just
what?
a bit of a waste of time.
So what? Why do we have this
why-
assumption that you have to progress with enthusiasm in everything that you do? Sometimes you just have to pay your own way in the world.
Well, because ultimately a lot of work does not pay its way at the moment, and I think that is something we, again, have to all come to terms with that. A lot of people who are on benefits in this country at the moment are in work. Actually, when you look at how much it is that people, for example, take on in debt when they go to university, or the sort of wages that are being offered relative to, for instance, the rents or the mortgages that are currently on offer, along with house prices, actually a lot of young people, I could entirely understand, would sit there and look at many of the opportunities in front of them and go, well, this sucks. This isn't actually a very good set of options, and training to be whatever this thing that this local centre has offered me doesn't offer me a way out of that. I think that it's always a good thing to be training people, obviously to be constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly improving yourself, but I do think that it's all very dependent on what specifically it is. If it's something like, I don't know, catering or something like that, where you don't necessarily see a future for yourself in the food industry and there isn't a shortage of jobs, is that particularly a useful thing? Is it learning Mandarin? That might be a very useful thing, seeing as we're
Yeah, but you see, this is where Aaron, I think what Benedict is saying, no offence to you, but I think this is one of the problems in society, that all of these young people, they're looking at these, they're flicking through this catalogue of opportunity and courses and going, oh, that doesn't infuse me, that's not me, this is not me. You know what? Sometimes you just have to do really rubbish stuff. You just have to start at the very bottom sometimes, and you have to do stuff that you have to drag yourself out of bed in the morning to get yourself there, because you have to pay your own way.
I think it's good for you as well.
Yes.
It's
Well, this notion, though, that you need to be infused and have future career prospects, and yes, in an ideal world, you know, great. But that's not the real world.
It's not to do with the job so much. It's to do with the money. It's to do with the remuneration. My first job was working nights in a factory, and I did it for over a year, and I did it because I got paid really well. Not because I saw myself working in a factory, but as I thought, I'll save enough money to be able to move out of this area and go and do something else. I think that's as much as what it is, rather than simply, you know, pursuing your dreams or anything like that.
I think you can pursue your dreams, by the way, and I high-five that. But if there's not the opportunity at the point in time in which you want it, then I think wanting and expecting to be able to live off the taxpayer whilst your dream opportunity becomes available to you is a bit deluded, isn't it?
Well, I think lots of young people can be charged with delusion. I certainly was a bit delusional as a teenager, I have to be honest. But I do agree that, in principle, the idea that a young person is either earning or learning is a good one, in principle, or working. Just generally. I mean, it might be volunteering or whatever, but, you know, in principle, they should be doing something. However, the proof is in the pudding, and I think the execution of this kind of policy is critical. So, for instance, the guarantee of training. By who? Local authorities. Do I trust local authorities to be aligning training with the needs of the country more widely in terms of human capital and where we should be investing in the labour force? Why are local authorities doing that? That seems rather strange to me, right? That's the first one. Secondly, look at things like apprenticeships. People here, we're doing more apprenticeships now than 5 years ago, than 10 years ago. Brilliant. They think engineers. They think, you know, sheet metal workers. No, these are people doing Photoshop for the local takeaway, and we've suddenly rebranded it as an apprenticeship. So I think apprenticeships are great, but I think we need to have good apprenticeships for jobs that really matter and create value. We need to have training that is important and creates value. In this country, we need tens of thousands of nurses, tens of thousands, and that's before we talk about not relying on nurses from global south countries, you know, poorer developing countries. Tens of thousands. We should not be charging tuition fees to study nursing. Now, some people say there shouldn't be a university course at all.
I was just about to say, why does it have to be a degree subject? That's what my viewers will be shouting.
That's a conversation we can have. But the idea that to enter the nursing profession, you have to get yourself into around £50,000 worth of debt is completely insane. So, look, we have, you know, thousands of young people, I was going to say kids, I'm getting old now, thousands of people that could be filling those gaps. I think we all agree that's a really good idea. Is training by local authorities the way to get there? I'm sceptical.
One of the things that caught my eye is that a third of disability claims at the moment are mental health claims. This is probably because you've got a load of young people that look at the career opportunities and go, I don't want to be like that, I want to be like this, and they get themselves in all waked up into a tizzy, and that amounts to some of what we're seeing here.
Well,
Am I being harsh?
A lot of them also think that the planet's about to catch fire, and that, you know, that can do strange things if you have that sort of doomsday attitude. I think that the phenomenon of poor mental health amongst young people is partly due to a lack of opportunities, but is also due to mimetic factors. There's also aspects of it which is a hangover from the pandemic, certainly amongst the younger cohorts. But as I say, I think that the more you talk about poor mental health, the more it seems to appear. And as I say, that's what I mean when I say it's mimetic, is that somebody recognises perfectly normal feelings of feeling a little bit lackluster or a little bit dejected and thinks, oh, suddenly I'm depressed. And that then ends up spiralling into something else. And I also think in this country we have a really bad solution to this, which is to just medicate people who say that they have poor mental health. You stick them on Ritalin or beta blockers or whatever that is, and there you go, you're solved. And that doesn't solve the problem at all, just chucking pills at somebody who's just a little bit sad or has seasonal affective disorder or whatever it is. I think that we're really bad actually at dealing with what is poor mental health and what is perfectly normal behaviour. We just tend to, you know, pathologise all of it and go, that's a disability.
But also, I'm not undermining mental health, by the way, because I know it's a real thing and I know it debilitates a lot of people. But I also know from experience that one of the best things you can do with anyone that's got mental health issues is actually give them a structure, a routine. You've got to get up, you've got to get showered, you've got to get dressed, you've got to get out the door, you've got to be presentable. people and engage and interacting with people. It's called work and it's called life. The worst thing you can do often is hand people cash to stay in bed all day long. I don't really see how that helps their mental health. What do you make to it all? Get in touch and let me know. After the break, I spoke at the top of the show about we seem to be skint, but we seem to be able to find money everywhere. And now the latest idea is to find many more millions, this time to help upstream when it comes to people crossing into this country. Should we be doing deals with countries, the likes of Vietnam and so on, to try and stop people making the crossing to the UK? You tell me.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It is pretty cold for the time of year for some of us, and with that, there is the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through this evening and overnight. That's because we have a weather system coming in from the west, and it's going to bump against the cold air that's across many northern parts of the UK currently, leading to the risk of some significant snow, particularly across northern parts of England. Could be up to 20 centimetres perhaps over some higher ground, and even some accumulations to lower levels too. Also a snow and ice risk across parts of Northern Ireland and the far north of Scotland. Across parts of Scotland where we get some clear skies, temperatures plummeting. A harsh frost here, with some places falling to around -8, possibly even colder than this. But it's going to be a milder start further south, where we have a bit more cloud and some outbreaks of rain. So a bit damp first thing across southern parts, but also relatively mild. Most of the snow and the wet weather across northern England will have cleared away as we go through early in the morning, and also across Northern Ireland it should have turned dry by then. Meanwhile, across Scotland, a bright but frosty start for many places. Do watch out for some icy patches and a little bit of lying snow as well because of those wintry showers coming in from the north. As we go through the day, and yes, most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared away towards the east. Watch out though, there will be some outbreaks of rain feeding into parts of the southwest in particular, and across the north of Scotland we're going to continue to see those wintry showers. So again, some sleet or snow with accumulations continuing to build up. It is going to be a chilly day, temperatures on the low side for the time of year and feeling even colder in those brisk winds. Little change as we go into Wednesday, sticking with a cold northerly flow, and it's on that northerly flow that we're going to see some further wintry showers in anywhere exposed to that wind direction. And again, despite the fact that there will be plenty of sunshine around, it is still going to feel bitterly cold. We are going to see some further wintry showers through the rest of the week, perhaps some more persistent snow for some of us. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long delays of well over an hour heading west of Glasgow on the M8. Now, a lorry broke down at junction 23, the Dumbreck Road exit, with a lane still blocked off, with long queues back onto the M74. On the M6 in Cheshire, the inside lane's blocked off southbound from junction 21A to 21. This is just north of the M62 at the scene of an accident. On the M5 in Worcestershire, the southbound slip road to the Frankley services is closed after a lorry caught fire. One to bear in mind if you're heading south of the Midlands. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the inside lane's blocked northbound just before junction 24, the East Midlands Airport turn-off at the scene of an accident. And on the M11 in Essex, one lane's closed southbound from junction 7A to 7 near Harlow after a breakdown. In Hampshire, the A339 blocked northbound at Basingstoke just off the M3 following an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock if you've just joined us. Alongside us, Benedict Spence, the political commentator, and Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media, is alongside me. Mick, you've made me laugh. He's got in touch and said, good evening, Michelle and team. We have just started charging our daughter £50 a week board. He says, blimey, you would think we were robbing her blind. She's even started calling her mum the landlady. He says she's 19. I think that's great, charging your kids board. Do you?
Well, it depends how much they're earning. Do they need to save, etc., etc.?
Yeah, but only a small. You don't have to.
Yeah,
like...
if it's a token thing, of course. Yeah, I mean, you know, it depends, doesn't it? I've heard some horror stories of sort of parents charging like market rates to their kids, basically. I think that's a bit out of order, I'll be honest.
Oh, I think. Do you support Mick and the landlady?
My parents do charge my sister to live with them, but she earns more than me, so I think that's perfectly fair.
Oh, I think it's great. Mick and the landlady. I think you should tell your daughter from me. I think you're doing a great job. You're setting her up for life, understanding that nothing in life comes for free. That's what I say. Martin, one of my other viewers, says, Michelle, you all keep talking about skilled jobs and and training, people need to realise that ultimately in life, some people do need to do unskilled work. Katrina says, Michelle, anyone should take any work that they are offered, because whatever you're doing, you'll learn transferable skills like problem solving, communication, and so on and so forth. Pam, you've been in touch as well. You're telling me about your grandsons and doing some of the apprenticeships, but you're pointing out as well that not everybody is academically minded, and so many people now, they need passes in maths and English and so on, which is holding people back if they're not that way inclined. Thank you very much for getting in touch on that one. But look, the Prime Minister has hinted that the UK could start paying countries. This is all about trying to stop migrants crossing what they call upstream. Remember that they did some of this in Italy, didn't they? We would be looking at countries like Vietnam. Is this a good idea, good policy move in your view?
I think it works for a country like Italy in a way that it's not going to work for the UK, partly because the deals that Italy have done with Albania for repatriation and with Libya and Tunisia, Italy effectively shares borders with them. I know the Mediterranean is in between, but actually it's a very simple A to B route for a lot of these people. So Italy can monitor in real time what it's doing. And it could also, part of the deal that Italy has struck with the two North African countries is that it's going to train and supply the coast guards of both countries, the authorities, so it can keep a very close eye on what's going on. But that's, as I say, it's the A to B movement from North Africa directly to Italy. It has worked up to a point. I think they've cut crossings, the number of people, by almost 60%. But if you're talking about the UK, which is, a measure further away in terms of the countries that we're talking about, Vietnam, Iraqi Kurdistan, it's much harder, actually, I think, to put your fingers on exactly the moving parts. There are many, many countries in between, all along that supply chain. The country that actually we should just be dealing with, if that's what we want to do, is France, because that's the A to B in this
But we've been
situation.
giving France millions.
Exactly, and it's not working. So the solution is, in fact, to just deport more people. Ultimately, it's not like...
Well, you say the solution is to deport people.
It's not like, let's be clear, it's not like Vietnam is a failed state. It's not like it doesn't have functioning airports. It's not like it's going to turn its own citizens away. It's also not like parts of Iraq aren't perfectly fine these days to do so. You can fly into Iraq perfectly fine. We have diplomatic relations with these governments. You can deport these people. We choose not to. Most other countries around the world actually think that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, even if it breaks international law. They ask questions later, one of which happens to be Italy, another one happens to be France. But that's more sort of the point, is that actually most other countries, they just get on and do it. They do the dirty work. And it must be said, as part of this, Italy, dealing with Tunisia and Libya, is dealing with governments that most human rights organisations around the world go, this money is going to go towards abusing these people's human rights. Italy doesn't seem to have a problem with that.
But you said deporting people is the only solution here. Again, yeah. I listen to my viewers every day, and some of these people at home, I think your microphone's crackling up, so I'll just sort that out and I'll lean towards Aaron for this. Some of my viewers will be shouting at their screens saying deporting people isn't just the only solution, because many would argue that there hasn't been enough consideration done about turning these boats back, stopping people actually reaching the shores in the first place. What do you think to that?
Oh, well, I wouldn't even go that far. So I think the case of Libya is really intriguing. We removed Gaddafi, I believe, in 2011, 2012, and then you get what's been commonly referred to as the European refugee crisis in 2014, 2015. And there's a direct relationship between those two things. And I've spoken about this many times with you, Michelle. I think we broadly agree on this. There is clearly some sort of a connection between failed foreign policy and migration flows into Europe. Now, we can have a debate about how bad that is, but it's clearly a thing. And what you're seeing with the story on Libya and Italy is that it's in Europe's interest, our rational self-interest, to have safe, solid, reliable, moderately prosperous countries in our near abroad. What we've done for much of the last 25 years is bomb, invade and occupy them.
Yep.
So I think that foreign policy and migration go hand in hand. As Benedict says very quickly, Vietnam is a really nice country, actually.
Beautiful. I travelled solo around it in 2018.
They're about to get high-speed rail. They're doing pretty well. So that is a very strange one. The Libya deal is interesting as well, in so much as obviously people are going to Italy but then passing on to France, Germany, etc. So if Italy, Greece get these kinds of deals, that also benefits
but you've
the likes of Northern Europe.
Point as well, when I was saying to you that everyone just seems to be uncomfortable with exploring the possibility properly of turning these boats around. Why?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean,
physically turning around them in the water. Well, I suppose that's because it's technically quite challenging, isn't it? You'd rather than not get in the water at all.
Well,
that's why
I don't know if it's technically challenging, and I would argue that there doesn't seem to have been enough exploration of that as a potential solution.
So let me start with two things. Firstly, I don't think it's sensible for anybody to suggest that people cross the English Channel. It's a very busy route. It can be very treacherous weather. That should not be happening. The French government and the French Coast Guard should be ensuring that does not happen. It's not safe for those people. But I do also think that that's relatively small fry, and it's tens of thousands of people. It's a lot of people. But if you look at the long-term trend, Iran has 90 million people. Egypt has 100 million people. Pakistan has 250 million people. We need these countries to be safe, secure, subject to a rule of law, moderately prosperous.
But again, you're avoiding my point, because my point is a simple one.
450 million people.
If those birds were not allowed to reach the UK shores, well, I'm telling you now, you'd dry up your business of people smuggling in an instant. If you knew that you are not going to make it to the UK, end of story.
Well, that's what Benedict is suggesting, that you just deport people that come here.
It's more of a practical.
I'm saying stop the birds before they get here.
It's more of a practical point. The Greeks tried to do this, and it lands you in all kinds of hot water because people end up dying. What you have to do is disable the motors, turn them around and push them. And actually, in a 24-mile... More people would die if you disabled the motors, basically. Given that these things are overcrowded, you'd end up having to take people anyway, because often they are
Do you think this solution is being explored properly?
No, of course it's not, because it wouldn't work. Because if you push them back to France...
It won't work if it hasn't been explored.
As I say, more people will end up dying in the Channel. That's not actually something... Because this is what happened in Greece. This is what happened when the Greeks started pushing people back towards Turkey, and more people ended up dying. If you disable the motors, which you have to do, because otherwise they just keep on going, then you're leaving them basically at the mercy of whether or not the French authorities turn up on time, whether or not they get hit by something, whether or not they get capsized by a wave.
Quickly, what you do is, if these birds are not going to make it, I'm not going to get in them.
Yeah, but if you just deported people, if you picked them up, you took them to a holding centre and you say, right, you've entered the UK illegally, congratulations, within a week you'll be gone, you have the same impact. Now, maybe it cost a little bit more in the short term, but fewer people would die, and it does have the same effect of basically saying, you've spaffed a load of money, you've lost a load of money coming all of this way, it's been very futile, and now you're going back to Vietnam. It's the same basic principle, but it's slightly less dangerous than just saying, in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, off you go back to France. Hopefully the French Coast Guard pick you up. Maybe they don't, but it's not really our problem.
Well, you won't just push them back, would you?
That's literally what happens. No, that's literally what happens, though. That's literally what the Greeks
Well,
did.
you can tell me at home, do you think, well, just because the Greeks did it that way doesn't mean you have to emulate that model.
So
what I'm
we would
arguing
tow
is
them illegally back into French territorial waters, showing the world that we were doing
What I'm arguing is I don't believe there has been a serious conversation to explore whether or not it is a physical possibility to do this and how it could work, if it could work. I don't believe that conversation has been properly and sensibly had.
But Michelle, you're really on top of this. You know, you talk about this a lot. I mean, on some days in summer, the number of boats coming over is really significant.
As it currently stands, because they know that when they make it to the UK, they'll be in a 4-star hotel before their feet can hit the ground.
But we're talking on some days, I mean, I don't know the numbers. I think some days, you know, we're talking about hundreds of boats on the worst possible days. The idea that you'd be able to turn even half of those back seems implausible to me.
Well, if you started enacting that kind of policy, if it was explored and believed to be able to be done in relative safety, if you started enacting that now during the quieter periods, you wouldn't have a situation where hundreds of boats would be flocking over in your high-volume summer months, would you?
Well, you tell me. I think it's a combination of all these things, but I think Benedict's right. I mean, look, you wouldn't want to be in number 10 when, let's say, a boat with 60 kids and women sinks in the middle of the English Channel because the Royal Navy turn them around. You wouldn't want to be.
Good luck finding a boat with 60 kids and women in that. That's what I'd say, because they're all predominantly men. That's the first thing I would say. And if we're going to keep asking British taxpayers, where we're so skint that we can't even heat our own pensioners in the winter, apparently, if you're going to ask us to be in that situation and continue finding millions and tens of millions to try and solve this issue, then I think we should be shown that all routes to stopping this have been actively, proactively explored. And I would argue that that current option that I'm suggesting has not been, certainly not in the public domain, accurately and thoroughly explored. It might come to nothing. There might be no way at all that it is possible humanely or legally or whatever to be done. But I'm putting it to you, and you can decide whether I'm right or wrong, that it has not been publicly explored. I'll tell you something that was publicly explored to no avail, the Rwanda scheme. Labour, you'll all be familiar with this, they promised that they would stop that the second they got in, and fair play to them, finally one promise that they stuck to. They stopped it, everyone. You'll never guess what, ladies and gents. It's now been explored by none other than Donald Trump. You couldn't make this up.
It's very funny in many ways. Paul Kagame must be one of the best heads of state in the world in the way that he's just able to sort of draw Western governments into this game of charades. Whether or not the United States decides to go ahead with this as a sort of a headline policy, I'm not sure. Their migration problems are just incomparable to ours. Millions of people across the southern United States border, and it would still be, if you were sending people to Rwanda, in the hundreds, maybe the thousands. So I think it would be one of those sort of headline-grabbing things. It would perhaps be used as a stick to beat Keir Starmer with if the US was then able to reverse its migration problem. But as I say, you can't compare the two. What's going on there and here, it's just very different. I do think that Donald Trump is going to be a lot tougher on migration than Keir Starmer is. I do think he's probably going to get better results. Perhaps not entirely because he wants to, because people in his administration want to. But I think that this is... I always thought that Rwanda in and of itself was a gimmick because it simply doesn't take enough people for it to be worthwhile. And certainly a few hundred people out of millions that are coming into the United States, that's not going to make a dent. What is going to make a dent is just, well, as I say, putting people on buses and planes and taking them straight back to Mexico.
Aaron Bastani?
Well, what's the population of Rwanda? Like 5-10 million? It's a tiny country. Yeah. I mean, it's the most densely populated country in Africa, but it is a tiny, tiny country. And according to Trump, there are 20 million undocumented migrants in the United States. So presumably you'd have to sort of double Rwanda's population overnight if they all went to Rwanda.
Yeah, but let's be sensible. He's not proposing sending everybody there, is he? Because like you say, it's tens of millions of people. Not going to happen. But at the end of the day, having something as a deterrent somewhere. So look, if you want to enter whatever it is, America, the UK or whatever, and actually where you're going to end up is Rwanda, that is going to make you think twice about handing over your readies to get into that country, is it not?
Well, the disincentive, well, certainly I think if you're coming from somewhere like Venezuela, you're trying to get to the United States, like that's at least the same hemisphere, and then you're sent to Rwanda. I suspect that would be quite worrying, yes.
One of the things that many people often overlooked about the Rwanda plan was that it wasn't necessarily a one-for-one, but it was a two-way exchange, because as much as the plan was to send people over to Rwanda, there was also in the small print that we would have to receive people from the other way, from Rwanda as well. Look, I know some of you guys at home, you'll have very strong opinions on the conversations you're hearing. Get in touch all the usual ways. You're very welcome. I shall bring you into the conversation after the break. But I want to look at whether or not our Chancellor has potentially, allegedly, been telling porcupines when it comes to her career experience. That is the allegation made against her. Is it true? And if it is true, what should be the consequence? See you in 2.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
A Tesco store on a Scottish island has defied locals by ignoring pleas to stay closed on Sundays.
Tesco's has said that no member of staff in Stornoway would be forced to work on a Sunday and that it had received a significant amount of positive reaction to its plans.
Well, let's talk now to the Minister of the Reformed Presbyterian Church, Reverend Kenneth Stewart. Good morning to you, Reverend Stewart. You're trying to keep Sunday special, and if Tesco are going to open up, that means it won't be quite as special for you.
Well, yes, good morning, and thanks for having me on. Yes, Tesco, for some reason, they claim it's not economic advantage, but for some reason they've decided to go against hundreds of years of tradition on this island and the deeply held religious convictions of many, many people, including, of course, their own customers who are really grieved by this decision. We come obviously from the standpoint that a day of rest is effectively mandatory. It's a human right, along with the other 10 commandments which have undergirded our moral and legal fabric in society. It actually enshrines the human right to a day of rest. And of course, in the UK, that's been eroded for many, many years. Incidentally, it's still far more respected on the continent. But for us here, the Sabbath or the day of rest has been very, very important. It's not just what we do, it's who we are. And for some reason, Tesco have decided just to go against that.
And Reverend Stewart, we were actually talking about this earlier, how in European countries, I mean, even in France, which is a secular country, still very few shops will open on a Sunday.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello everybody, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Benedict Spence and Aaron Bastani remain alongside me. I've got to say, you sensible folk, there's many people saying what I was saying, which is they would at least like to feel that there was exploration happening about potential turn-backs. But you told me in the break that I would do international relations like what?
I said I thought you'd have done very well at the height of empire.
Yeah, he's basically saying I'm old-fashioned and out of touch.
You were 150 years too late. You'd have been a groundbreaking figure in the Foreign Office back in the day.
Common sense, I think. It's just basic common sense, isn't it? Maybe I'm stuck in a
show the locals what's
something.
what, that sort of thing.
Kevin says, Michelle, I was listening on the radio. I've turned on the telly only to see Benedict's moustache. Is it the 70s again? What's going on?
Well, economically, yes, we are sliding backwards.
We are. But there's a very serious cause about your moustache. That's why I'm raising it.
Yes, it's Movember. I'm not doing this because I think it looks good. Please, believe me.
It's not a fashion statement.
Yes, it's not. It's because prostate cancer kills lots of people and you should go and get checked, if you're a chap, obviously.
I thought Movember was about mental health.
No, it's not about... It might be about mental health, but it was supposed to be about prostate cancer.
Oh, well, there we go. All the more reason to raise awareness, because I did not realise it related to prostate cancer. And as you'll all know, my partner was diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer not that long ago, so great cause. Look, let's talk then, shall we, about our Chancellor, because there's lots of questioning and pressure being put on her as to whether or not she's been straight with her experience. This is kind of rumbling on and on and on. We touched on this, I think it was on Friday actually, wasn't it? Whether or not she was an economist and what level she operated at, and whether or not she's been truly transparent with her position and roles. Where are you on this, Benedict?
I mean, I'm in two minds about it. I think that the chicanery about it doesn't look good. Even if it might only be quite minor, I think it's very embarrassing that somebody who's got themselves all the way to number 11 might have been not entirely clear with their professional background, given the importance of the role. But on the other hand, politically, I don't think that she can resign. I don't think that Keir Starmer can be seen to be anything other than fully supportive. It's far too early on, and we've just had a very important budget for the Labour Party, for the new government. If there was any question mark over her position, I think it would really shake the foundations of this government in a way that Keir Starmer simply isn't going to tolerate. So, whilst obviously I don't think that she's a very good Chancellor, and I think that there are questions to answer here, I don't think it's going to happen, not for a second.
Really? Aaron, where are you?
Well, it is worrying, isn't it? Because Rachel Reeves is one of those politicians who appeals to credentials. You know, some politicians appeal to charisma, like Boris Johnson. Some appeal to particular policies. John McDonnell would say, I want to bring this into public ownership. I believe in this idea. I dislike that idea. Rachel Reeves' thing is credentials, credentialism. I had experience in the Bank of England as an economist. I've studied here. I've done this. I've done that. You can like it or dislike it, that's just what she does. The problem is, if you're going to appeal to credentials, make sure that those credentials are accurate. So I think it's particularly bad here. I agree with what Benedict's saying. Look, if we had Rachel Reeves resign in disgrace, we would be in a sort of Liz Truss Mark II situation, I suspect. Now, people watching or listening on here, they might not like Labour very much. I suspect they would dislike interest rates going up a couple of % even more. So it's not in the national public interest for her to resign. If you think that she's misrepresented herself, I think she has, and that that's unacceptable, then, you know, hold her accountable at the next election.
It's going to be a long 4 years, isn't it, everyone? Is it 4 years? Have we only got 4 years to go? It's going to be a very long time, isn't it? Look, Keir Starmer, he's also been speaking out today as well, because we're up to date now with this. It was the free speech row that's been kind of catching a lot of people's attention about Alison Phillips. That's what kind of brought it into the fore for a lot of people. And Keir Starmer, he has urged police to focus on what matters most when it comes to fighting crime. Police the streets, essentially, and not the tweets. I think he's got a bit of a cheek, though, Aaron Bastani, because he is the fella that's basically tried to clamp down on what people have been saying on Twitter and the like.
I really think we have to have a constitutional right to free speech in this country. We need a written constitution. And I know lots of people on the right, they appeal to Britain's august and venerable system of an unwritten constitution. But I really think in the US, when you say something and the police or somebody accosts you, you have this tiny little document, you say, it's my constitutional right, leave me alone. Everybody knows, broadly speaking, that's how it works.
Yeah, but we don't have a written constitution, really, though, do we? No, so how would that work?
Well, I think we're going to need a minimal written constitution about freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of political conscience, and you keep it very minimal. Like the US, it's very, very minimal, you know, apart from the gun ownership. I think broadly you could do a one-to-one. And I think that's really critical, because until then, we're just going to have this profusion of new legislation, NGOs, people saying that person's wrong, cancel them, delete them, arrest them. It's just going to be a mess. And I think in an era of social media, you're going to have that as a written, codified thing. Everybody knows it. Everybody can appeal to it.
But I would be interested to see if you made almost like a primacy of freedom of speech, how compatible that would be with things like the European Convention of Human Rights and things like that. I wonder if we could do that without having to exit some of those conventions or not.
Well, interestingly enough, some of that legislation actually is the stuff that people who want to defend their freedom of speech appeal to. So, for instance, you've had these teachers who have been, they've lost their jobs because of religious opinions. Often the cases that they bring, sometimes successfully, is actually appealing to human rights legislation. So, you know.
Well, there you go. Create a written constitution and put that at the forefront. Benedict, where are you?
I mean, I am in favour of free speech, absolutely. But I actually think most people in this country are not. And I think most GB News viewers might be. But actually, I think more people broadly, when you get down into the nitty-gritty details of it, lots of people will have little caveats that they don't like. We've never had absolute free speech in this country, much as I would like us to. But that's because ultimately, when you get into the special interests and this group and that group, is this protected speech, is this not? Who does this particular speech, damage? What about things like the royal family? What about things like Parliament? It gets very tricky. And we see this. You were mentioning earlier. Why haven't you? Somebody wrote in and said, why haven't you mentioned this case? There are many reasons why you can't mention lots of things in this country. It does get very tricky. And I think actually, if you were to put all of this in front of the average British person and say, do you just want to get rid of all of that? They'd actually go, oh no, that sounds a bit dangerous. So as much as I'm in favour of it, I don't think there is a popular movement or desire for that in this country. As much as I and probably Aaron would quite like to change that, I don't think we're quite there yet, and I also don't think we're going in that direction, frankly. I think, if anything, for instance, the pro-Palestine marches and conversations about what isn't anti-Semitism, I think has shown that there is not actually that much desire for absolute free speech in this country, because a lot of things that people say that might be considered very vile, which would be protected in the United States, aren't protected here, and a lot of people say that that's a good thing.
One of my viewers, coming back to that conversation earlier on about skills and training for the young people, Frankie's got in touch with my granddaughter, did a 3-year nursing degree, and now she's working at a local hospital, but she's got a massive debt of nearly 50 grand, he says, which at some point she's going to have to pay back. Again, I echo, many people will be getting in touch and saying, if we're so short of these kind of skills, why do you have to link them to a degree? That can be the question that you all spend your night pondering. How about that? Because it's all I've got time for. Aaron Bastani, thank you for your company. Benedict Spence, thank you for yours. And most importantly, thank you to each and every single one of you at home for spending your last hour with me. I very much appreciate it. Don't go anywhere, though, because Nigel Farage is up next. But that's all from me. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Good night. Thanks, guys.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News. A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems up in the West Midlands on the M42. The motorway is partly blocked northbound from junction 5 to 6, the Solihull bypass up to the Birmingham Airport turnoff. There's been a multi-vehicle collision causing long tailbacks back to the M40 and on the opposite side of the carriageway due to onlookers slowing down. The M11 is partly blocked in Essex heading towards London just after the Loughton turnoff, junction 5, by an obstruction of some kind. The M4 in Berkshire is blocked eastbound from junction 5 to 4B towards the M25 following an accident. In Devon, the A374 is closed along Union Street through Plymouth city centre because of an accident. And in Flintshire, just south of Flint, the Norfolk Road, that's still closed. Investigation works underway following an accident near the Coach and Horses, causing long queues back towards the A55 this evening. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681